This is the DarshanTalks podcast, regulatory guy, irregular podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at DarshanTalks or the show's website at DarshanTalks.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to Darshan Talks. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help patients trust the products they depend on. I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA-regulated products. So if you have an interest in an FDA-regulated company or its product, this is the podcast for you. Today's podcast is about something that I am continuously confused about. I'm always trying to figure this out. I find myself going, I finally got this, and then realize, no, I don't. So if you are in sales, if you are in medical affairs, if you are a CEO trying to bring notice to your company, you want to listen in because we're going to talk about content marketing. Our guest today is the director of content for Atlas Biomed. She does not necessarily represent the views of Atlas Biomed, but she is the director of content for them. And she focuses on the application of future technologies to the long-term health of populations. I think that sounds really, really fancy. So I want to find out what that actually means. Because I feel like that's one of those things people say, and then when you actually ask them, they're like, I don't know what that means either. But she's actually doing work in it. So we're going to ask her questions, and that's the opportunity we get. So ladies and gentlemen, our guest for today, Leigh Stewart. Leigh, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to start discussing that blurb, which is basically marketing wording that everybody puts at the beginning of what their company statement is.
I think you start off with changing lives. I think that's the part you missed.
But everybody wants to say that. Everybody's changing lives. I can't say that.
If you're not changing lives, what are you doing?
I sit at a desk every day. I don't know. I feed my cats. I suppose, is that changing lives or maintaining life? That is the big question. But I mean, changing lives there's so much competition in that space. That's what everybody is essentially trying to sell us right now. And the reality is, how much are we changing lives? And that's why I like to focus on the future impacts, because I work in DNA and microbiome testing for consumers, but that has broad-ranging applications also for medical research in terms of specific conditions, but also for helping to achieve homeostasis within the body for the general population by targeting key areas such as lifestyle and diet.
I almost understood some of those words. And the truth is, I'm going to start with the beginning, which is the part I actually enjoyed, where you went, that's a really crowded field. I don't want to be in the business of changing lives because there's just too much competition. And I feel like that's where content marketing starts. Content marketing starts by going, that's too busy. What can I say that's something different? And first of all, is that fair? Or as someone who doesn't understand content marketing, I'm thinking about it all wrong?
I think that's fair in the sense that changing lives, I mean, if we were to Google, check the search engine value of changing lives, I bet there would be a lot of competition in that space. And realistically, who in the general population is going on the internet and they're like, okay, changing lives, this is what I want to research. Changing lives is a two-word statement that really doesn't reflect the individual needs. And I think that's what content and content marketing can actually do. We can reach out and address people directly by understanding what their needs are. And some people will call that pain points, especially in sales. I really hate when people call that pain points, because people, especially when they're searching for health information, they are experiencing a state of vulnerability. And our goal should not be to identify what makes people sensitive and then how to manipulate them. I see content as an opportunity to reach out to people and provide them with high quality health information that will help them make the right decisions, and not necessarily always buy a product, but by accompanying them in this experience, we are providing the value that will build loyalty. So if at some point in time our product is the right fit for their needs, they know where to go and find it.
So that's really interesting. You talk about this perspective of you're trying to build a long-term relationship almost with the audience. And when you're trying to build this long-term relationship, what I'm hearing you say is you want to do that using high quality content, and that builds loyalty. Here's a question I have. From the perspective of someone who's trying to build that relationship and trying to build that loyalty, what's the difference between loyalty and trust? And is there a difference?
I think I would probably use loyalty and trust interchangeably. That's not necessarily the case for a lot of companies and products online that are trying to build loyalty, because there's a lot of misinformation in terms of health that's out there. And so while you could technically be building loyalty and trust at the same time, it is possible that at some point in time, your claims may be debunked. And this would apply mostly to that area of health products that are lightly regulated versus things that have to go through the FDA and have very strict regulation like pharmacy or biotechnology. For me, both things are very much part and parcel of the same experience. As I said, again, these people who are looking for health information are extremely vulnerable. If you explore the terms that are searched for these very famous keywords in search engine optimization, you will understand that people have these concerns that they're not willing to talk to other people about, that they may feel are embarrassing, that are not necessarily something they need to go to the doctor for. But there is that intense vulnerability that is exposed there. And so for me, when you're trying to answer these questions, while you're building trust, you are building loyalty. This is not legal advice. I am not a lawyer.
No, but I was trying to also give you some, what's the word I'm looking for? Plausible deniability. But what
Thank you. Now I'm worried.
No, I always try to do that for all my guests, because I like them to know that this is about creating that relationship. So okay. So let's start from the beginning. Let's say you've done this for companies before, based on the previous conversations we've had, which is you're trying to help a company go from no one's hearing my voice, I'm shouting in an empty theater, to let's go to a place where people hear what you're saying. How do you help a company bridge that journey using content marketing?
Well, I think in the first place, we have to understand that you can't force a product upon people. You have to find the people that have interest in your product. And that's where content marketing and especially search engine optimization comes in. There are lots of companies out there, especially new companies, but also a lot of old companies that haven't embraced the opportunities that exist within search engine optimization and are just, like, for example, creating a blog is something that lots of people do and lots of companies do, but there's a big reason that it fails. It's because they're trying to say, hey, this is my message and I want you to read all about me. Whereas content marketing is really making it all about your user and your audience and answering the questions that they have and responding to their needs and making it all about them.
So what you're drawing is a distinction between marketing and content marketing. Marketing is almost, let me tell you everything you want to know about my product. Content marketing is, let me tell you everything you want to know, and it just might include my product. Is that fair?
I don't know if that's completely fair.
Okay.
I think content marketing is a lot more subtle. You're not going out there with your signs and saying, hey, buy my product. I'm going to fix everything. You're going out, finding people who can be interested in your product. And by creating valuable information using blogs, using podcasts, using videos, one, you're answering questions that should be some way related to the product you're doing. If not, you're not doing the right type of content marketing. You should be targeting keywords and areas that relate to your product. And the likelihood is that these people will have an interest in your product. But the best way to touch people's lives is to create value within their lives. And selling people a product doesn't necessarily create value or meaning within their personal experiences as a human, whereas content marketing, in my view of it, is a way of reaching out and helping them to live better. And also, while you're doing that, making them aware that there are products that can help them achieve that possibly faster or more effectively.
So how does one even start to figure out what questions they should be asking? So again, we've had some previous discussions about this, but let's use me as an example, because I tend to obsess over myself a lot. But but I'm a regulatory lawyer. I advise all types of companies on FDA regulated products. Do I have to start by saying I can do 20 things, but let's talk about one? Or do I talk in general and I go, here are some interesting people and here are some interesting conversations, and that's what the conversation's about? Like, how do you even begin to narrow the scope, or do you not narrow the scope at all?
I would start, first of all, by narrowing the scope, by identifying what specific services you offer. So this could be by creating a bullet list of, so I do regulatory within this area. Within this area, I work with these products. Then you can break down those bullet points into even more specific areas. And the goal should then be to do keyword searches to identify what opportunities exist within Google for you to publish information that will reach the population that you're interested in. So the first thing is identifying what you do. Then checking the search engine optimization keyword information to identify the keywords that respond with that, then creating content that target those individual areas. The reality with this is there will come a time where you have covered every area of the product or offering that you have available, and then you will have to start considering different ways to explore your product. So it could be related to your area, common questions that come up. This is what search engine optimization software can do. It can identify those questions that people are asking online. And so you could go and address those. At the same time, then you can branch out to areas that are related to it, that you have knowledge and experience that can contribute to whatever conversation is going online. And doing so you start with a small focus, then you broaden it, and then you're going to broaden it wider. There is a point where you will probably struggle to find very adapted keywords to enhance your content. And in that case, you have several options available, which could be exploring different types of platforms to promote your content, but also digging really deep into the keywords to identify very niche questions that may be asked. And I think that's all I have to say about that right now.
No, I think that's really interesting. I guess this is a problem a lot of people struggle with, and it's not a problem I've hit, which is I don't have enough to say. I have tons to say. I literally have a chart of probably about 5,000 questions I could go into if I really wanted to. But what I haven't done is say, this is the area I want to focus on, because I just have a lot of interest. What I'm hearing you say is no one wants to hear 5,000 different topics. You're not a variety show.
Exactly. You're not. You have to think of the web as it is literally that. It is nodes of information. Everything that you write spans out. So if you're specialized in a health area, if you then go off and start talking about sports,
right,
you're going to be confusing the algorithm, because the algorithm will see, because every time you publish an article or a podcast, the goal is that you're going to have backlinks from websites that are either very popular, so we're talking about, I don't know, Bustle or Facebook, forums, And then it's going to create this image of you within the algorithm, which is saying, okay, this person's focused on health. So if you branch out into a completely different topic, then you're confusing the algorithm, and you may be sending a message that you're not consistent. So if you try to cover 5,000 different things that actually reside in different nodes on the internet, then you're not sending a clear message to the search engine algorithm. And that can affect how successful your content is.
So let's say let's stop talking about me, and this is very troublesome for me when we stop talking about me, but ignoring that part of it, let's say I am a new pharmaceutical company that has this brilliant new product. I'm looking for customers who want to buy it. I'm looking for scientists who want to come work with me. I'm looking for consultants who might be able to help me, and blah, 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 blah. Should your content be about your product? Should your content be about why you're a great place to work? Should your content be about the amazing tools you have, and the relationships you have? How do you start building that out?
First, you're going to have to identify who you want to address. Because if you're addressing consultants versus customers, and by that we're talking about healthcare providers most likely, then you have to identify the issues within their professional existence that you can resolve. So you're going to have to figure out, for example, maybe if your product targets a certain health problem, then you're going to have to dig into your search engine optimization data, but you're also going to have to tailor this to your audience. The problem with search engine optimization keywords is that it's everything everybody searches for at any point in time on the internet. You can narrow this down by location. You can also narrow this down by search engine, but then you're going to have to narrow it down yourself to identify the keywords that correspond with the needs of your audience. And HCPs are going to be very different from the general population. And so this is where you would start. Start by writing about your product, start by identifying the health issues that it addresses, that it resolves, preparing posts about this or in a variety of formats, and then also identifying what the needs are of the population you're trying to sell it to.
So when you're building this out, you're talking about digging into the keywords. Where does one even start with something like that? Good.
You start I would highly recommend for most companies that are starting out on their search engine optimization route to go with an SEO consultant. There are a lot out there. They worldwide. They are very good at what they do. Obviously, there are some that are not, so you will be able to tell very quickly if they are correctly identifying your needs and creating so what they would do is they would create, for example, keyword lists and recommendations on how to structure your articles, and you will see immediately if they understand your product or not. But starting with a consultant and a good, reliable consultant is the best way. Because SEO is twofold. It's not only front end, so the content that you're publishing, but it's also the back end of your website. It's looking at if your pages load fast enough, if there are issues with your JavaScript, if the links that you have posted are functioning correctly, if you have orphan pages that are not linked to anything else, or if some of your pages have broken. So this is what an SEO consultant will do. First of all, is they will analyze the quality of the back end of your website, and they will also, depending on what you ask them to do, help you create content by creating keyword lists. And for example, in the case of blog posts, they should be able to give you a structure and say, put this keyword in the title, this keyword will go in the subtitle, this will go in these different areas, and recommend that you insert things like tables. YouTube videos are also very helpful, whether you should have infographics, what tags you need to put on your images. So this is within the HTML code so that it gets picked up by your search engine algorithm. And then later on, when companies get bigger, some companies start off directly by hiring their own inside SEO department. And then that work will happen within your company. And so This often starts off with getting a software package. So there are many online options for search engine optimization software. Some are more designed for very highly specialized SEO people, consultants or not. Some are more designed for companies that just want to kind of optimize what they're doing at a simpler level. And within this software, it will be able to identify areas within your website where there may be problems with the code. And it will also be able to, you will be able to use it to mine keywords and search for keywords and refine down and develop topics that attract people.
Fascinating. So you would, working at these companies, first of all, the thought process always is, oh, you're a pharma company, you have tons of money. But this is a place where you don't necessarily spend the money. You spend the money by going, this is not where I want to devote my resources. Someone can come in. How often should you have this SEO advisor look at your process? Is it every quarter, every year? What's too often?
From my experience, it is an ongoing exercise. When you start SEO, you shouldn't stop. I don't foresee a point where SEO is no longer important, realistically. So once you get in, your consultants, if they're working on the content aspect, you're going to have to publish a certain amount of articles at a certain frequency for a certain amount of time before the search engine starts to say, hey, okay, these guys are reliable. Okay, it seems like they're publishing good information. And only then will you start to make waves and start to say, hey, the new things I publish might be relevant, because your goal is always to be your goal is to be the top article on Google for the search term that you have decided that is going to be the topic of your content at that point in time. Number one is the top spot. Most people click on the first 3 articles on Google, for example. If you're within the health sciences arena, you might go down to the first 10, simply because if you're doing something that hasn't been discussed a lot at a general population level, then the first terms will always come up as scientific articles, which may not address the needs of consultants, of HCPs, or of the general population. So you could go down and be like, okay, my goal is to be in the top 10, and that's always very good. But most of the articles that you will publish for a very long time will not be anywhere near there. They will be in the top 100 or the top 30. And ask yourself, when's the last time you went to page 2 on Google?
Yeah. So what you're saying is that there is the continuous problem of shouting into the void, and there's no one listening. And SEO will help raise you from the void to a part that people might be listening in on. I guess the question though is, you said you use consultants and they can help and you use them regularly. Mm-hmm. But is a regular consultant someone who comes in every week, every month, every quarter, every year? It sounded like quarter and a year were not an option. That's too far.
Well, so from my experience, so there would be consultants in the sense that they're contractors.
Yeah.
So that's just operating in the European market. Sometimes the vocabulary may differ, but it would be on a month-to-month rolling basis.
Got it.
And the month, so because they work remotely, one of the examples of what we did has been we had an SEO consultant, and at the beginning of the month would deliver the keyword lists and structures for a certain amount of articles that we would write. And so that would then become part of the content goal. So every month you would have a KPI. I have to publish this amount of articles, and these are going to be keyword optimized. So on a rolling basis, they're delivering this optimization opportunity to you, and then it's for you to implement.
Got it. And if you're starting out your company, what should be an average budget you keep for something like that?
That's a hard question, but from my experience, search engine optimization doesn't require a big budget. It is not a big budget thing. Now, if you want to make a big splash on a search engine within a very short amount of time, you're going to have to throw a lot of money at it, because you're, in addition to having a search engine optimization advisor, you're going to have the people to produce the content. In some cases, the search engine optimization companies will offer to create that content. From my experience within the health sector, that is not an appropriate option, simply because the copywriters are very often generic. They write about just general topics that are online, and if you ask them to sink their teeth into a highly regulated and highly scientific area, then you're going to have issues with the accuracy, with the quality of the information, and possibly the risk of misinforming people about whatever your product does.
So the topic you just raised on who does the content creation is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, because I teach medical writers at the University of the Sciences, and they always talk about the type of competition they face, but also because I discovered that you are actually working on a master's on the topic. So could you talk a little bit about what you're doing there?
Yes, so I'm doing a Master's of Science of Transdisciplinary Practice. And within this, I am focusing on the topic of health content producers within digital health technologies. From the lot of reading that I've done, it has become clear to me over time, and also within my experience within biotechnology, that content is often that thing we do. It's often a bit like PR. People are like, oh, I don't know, like I pay PR and I don't know what the value of their work is. The reality is you can actually measure the value of content, but it's still perceived as like, oh, it's that content department. They write stuff. They're not like, do they write a lot? We're often kind of the last thought, but the reality is that your content producers and anybody in your company who's writing the content that's going to be put up online or in print that describes your product are essential to what you do. And this is particularly important in digital health technologies. While you will certainly have your app developers and website developers that are creating a structure to how the information is conveyed, you will have the designers that are creating that experience, and then your clinicians that are creating the clinically accurate interpretation system or product that you have going on. At the end of the day, who's writing this? It is right now, I don't think it's regulated at all. Depending on what the company is and the regulatory environment that they exist in, it could be literally anybody writing this information. Depending on, once again, on the regulation that they're subjected to, who is verifying what information is published? Are there scientific people within that company verifying that everything that's written by content producers is accurate? That is still questionable. And there's that big topic that who is writing your information, and that can vary wildly. You could get a job right now writing digital health content if you've written 5 articles for some major website that does listicles about 10 reasons why Brad Pitt should shave his beard, and then they'd have a health session. So
to be clear, number 3 will surprise you.
I wrote that article. But that begs that question. So there are medical writers, and the reality is there is great demand for medical writers.
Yeah.
Within very high levels. So they're going to be looking at the grant applications, they're going to be looking at regulatory documentation and highly specific stuff. But digital health is nowadays such a broad arena. Technically, a lot of websites can be considered digital health. And then it goes all the way to apps. And the reality is that a lot of people come into this arena that don't necessarily have the training, and that's okay if you have the experience and the knowledge to back it up. But then it begs the question, how do you become good at it? And I came into digital health with a background in real estate, fintech, gaming. I had written a paper for my first master's, which was in change management, which focused on metabolic syndrome and childhood obesity, and it was more focused on public health. But I went towards that of my own volition while I was working in gaming and doing this master's.
Yeah.
And that's the background I brought to it and said, this is what I can contribute. And what I'd written was evaluated by the clinicians on our team, and was also in still the early days of digital health technologies. And during the time, because I had many, many different experiences with our product, including launching it on the European market, I got to know our product and the scientific information supporting what we do very intimately. But now there is that question, and it's a question that needs to be asked, is who is producing the health content, and how does it fit in with the general landscape, which is currently just a debate between the doctors and the designers. This is what digital health is right now. It's like, oh, this is clinically accurate. I made a really pretty app. And then there's the content departments, which are writing and doing all this work, and they're never part of the debate. Whereas, for example, I see my role, because we're a consumer-directed company, I see myself as the advocate of our audience and of our users. I'm the person that says, we can't use this word. People don't know what this means. How can we phrase this in a clinically and scientifically accurate way that still makes sense to the end user? Because at the end of the day, what is digital health? It is a digital technology that has the goal of improving someone's health, whether it's long-term or more short-term if it's targeting a specific disease. And so there is that big debate, and I want to start it.
I think that's awesome. And we actually have to get into that on the next podcast we do with you, because it is straight up fascinating. Leigh-Ann, before we continue, I do want to ask you, is there a question you'd like to ask the audience?
I would like to know what the audience thinks about digital health technologies. So there's a lot of different types of digital health technologies. Technically, wearables constitute a digital health technology. If you're doing like a food tracking app or a diet app, that is a digital health technology. And at Atlas Biomed, we do digital health technologies too. But I have this feeling, so I have a wearable watch that tells me to stand up every hour and keeps on reminding me to breathe. And I have this reaction inside of me, which is like, go away. I'll breathe when I have time. I'll stand up when I have time. So my personal experience is that even though digital health technologies are everywhere nowadays, they're not all optimized to make us respond. And how are we going to create digital health technologies that work if we don't ask people, what don't you like? So what do you think of the digital health technologies that you have within your phone or on your arm right now? Do you think they're effective? Do you think they're not effective? Do you think they're okay, but they need a lot of work?
Excellent question. So we're going to do that. We also have a rapid fire set of questions for you. Mm-hmm. So you ready?
Yes. Okay.
What is an accomplishment you're most proud of?
Speaking 3 languages.
Oh, which ones?
I speak English, French, and Russian.
Alrighty then. You're James Bond and the villain in the same movie. Mm-hmm. Very cool. When are you most inspired?
Early morning. 7 or 8 a.m. That's when I start working.
Okay. Must be nice to be able to wake up early. I struggle. What's the best compliment you've ever received?
Oh. I was recently told that I had many more skills than the ones that I took into account, if that makes sense.
It does.
And it made me also realize that when you're a content manager, you're doing this thing and it's just taking shape. But then there's all these other words and all these other skills that tack onto that you just kind of forget about. And then you forget about all these achievements you've had in the past. And so when I heard that, I realized that I do, and it made me feel very good.
Very cool. What does a content manager look like in 20 years?
Oh, what doesn't a content manager look like in 20 years? I think we're going to have content managers for every different platform.
Specific to each platform.
Yes.
Interesting.
I do, and I think that because right now, even though there are some people who work purely in managing content departments tend to have a low budget. So it's a lot of hands on deck. You have to be a good writer, but I think what we're going to see is a lot more writers coming on board. And so there will be a lot more management of what's happening. They'll be really dialing in the analytics, and it will be very management focused rather than let's get everything done and I'll write that and you write that, and less messy.
Very cool. How do you define success?
Being content. I know I'm using the word content with a different
with a different inflection.
Yes, I aim to be content in life. I mean, I think happiness is lovely, but I mean, how often are you going to be truly happy? Being satisfied, waking up every day and feeling like you're doing the right thing, and being in a constructive environment where you're supported and you support other people and you can see that you're delivering results. That for me is success.
How do you balance, and this is actually coming up, I've never asked this question before, but how do you balance contentment with ambition?
I think that's individual for every person. I'm very ambitious. So for me to see things growing and to see things moving in the right direction contributes to that feeling of contentment. Whereas if everything was just the same every day and it's ticking over and it's fine, that would drive me mad.
Very cool. So is that what challenges you?
Yes, I think there are two different people. There are probably many, many different types of people depending on how you break it up within an office space. But I like to think of work. There are the people who maintain what has been created. And they're very good at being stable and reliable and delivering all the time. And then there's also innovators and who like to create. And I know I fall in that category, and it's not necessarily better than being the person who makes sure that the company functions, but I thrive on solving problems and creating new things to do is what gets me going. If I was told I had to come in every day and do exactly the same thing, I would be tearing my hair out.
If you were a superhero, what would your powers be?
Oh, teleportation.
Where would you go?
Everywhere. What can't you do if you can teleport? You can go anywhere.
You can, but the question is, where do you want to go?
Everywhere. I want to go on holidays. I wouldn't have to show a COVID passport at the airport.
So all of this to avoid the COVID passport.
No, you could also, you could teleport into the mythical Federal Reserves and get a bit of gold. You solve a lot of problems. You don't have to take airplanes or ride in cars or take trains. You can be everywhere and you can be on time all the time. And you could also get out of trouble, get into trouble. You could turn up at the Oscars. Would anybody ask you for a ticket? No, because you could teleport right into the building. It's genius.
You wouldn't have a seat.
I'm at the Oscars. Do I need a seat? There's free champagne in the back.
Fair enough. If your department was given $1 million, what would you use it for?
Pay rise?
Well played. Well played for sure. Sticking to the superhero theme, what is your kryptonite?
Lack of autonomy.
Wait, Lack of autonomy is your kryptonite, so you want autonomy, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. Highly controlling, micromanaging environments that don't embrace the knowledge that you have and that tell you, I know better, when you're like, wait a second, I'm the content person here. I think I know better. Those are environments I don't thrive in.
Fair enough. So before we go, I'm going to do a quick summarization of our conversation. We landed up talking about what is the role of content producers in digital health tech. We talked about the balancing of changing lives with individual needs. We talked a little bit about the different quote unquote pain points, which is not a term you like using. We then talked about the interchangeability for the purposes of content management around loyalty and trust. We then start talking about SEO and the role of SEO, which is really creating value for the audience. You create value by creating content. We talked about some ways to actually bring SEO value, and that included the use of consultants, the use of SEO keywords, and how that information can be further clarified, if you will, using search engines, using locations, and a variety of other factors. We talked about keyword lists. We talked about structuring articles, tables, YouTube videos, and you talked a little bit about how these contractors would even look at things like fast loading pages, are all your links working, and orphan pages. You did talk about something which we didn't get a chance to get into. Well, there were two things we didn't get into. One that I think is fascinating is the idea of measuring content and the value of the content and the efforts made there. So that's one. And the second one is discussing the evolving role of the content manager and what that's going to look like over time. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you did pretty well. If I gave you a test, I think you'd pass.
Wow, I'm getting a C. That's the bare minimum, but thank you. I appreciate it, Leigh. Thank you. If people want to reach you, where can they reach you?
On LinkedIn. I am connected with you, Darshan. You can find me at, I don't know my LinkedIn address. Ironically, as a content person, I actually don't use social media, and the only thing I have is LinkedIn.
Fair enough. Just to be clear, nothing in this podcast should be construed as legal, clinical, or regulatory advice of any kind. It's intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you do like this podcast, please leave a comment, and subscribe. You can find me at DarshanTalks on Twitter, or go to our website at DarshanTalks.com. Thanks, everyone. This was great having you, Leigh. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
This is the DarshanTalks podcast. Regulatory guy, irregular podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at DarshanTalks or the show's website at DarshanTalks.com.